They said there were men who felt no pain, men who laughed when swords cut them, men who howled like wolves and fought until they collapsed in the mud. These were the Viking Berserkers, feared by enemies, feared by kings, and sometimes feared even by their own families. For centuries, sagas described their fury, warriors who bit their shields, who wore the hides of bears and wolves, who blurred the line between man and beast. Some believed their power came from Odin, others thought it was madness, and later, some wondered if it came from strange mushrooms pulled from the forest floor. What we know for certain is that they became legends, symbols of fury so powerful that even today, when someone loses control, we say they went berserk. Before we begin, if you truly enjoy these stories, hitting like and subscribe helps me keep making them, and hopefully helps you keep drifting off. Let me know when and where you're listening from tonight. I'm always amazed by the places people tune in. Now, get comfortable, take a slow breath in, and then let it out, because once this story begins, chances are you'll be asleep before it ends. Congratulations, you've just woken up in the year 850. You're in coastal Scandinavia, on a fjord where pine forests lean over cold iron water. This is the Viking Age, a world of longships, skaldic verses and chieftains who rule by oath and gift. Smoke from a longhouse hearth threads the air with wood and fat and iron. Outside, the sea drums the rocks like a steady war beat that never ends. You sit up beneath firs that smell of hide and winter. Voices murmur in Old Norse beyond the door, deep and rough like gravel pulled by a tide. This land is not yet a single kingdom. It is a web of sea kings and local lords. Each hall is held by its herd, a retinue of sworn fighters bound by rings, silver and honour. This is the organised spine of power, but it is not the whole story. Because there is another brotherhood people speak of in a lower voice. A fellowship that does not sit well in neat ranks or obey horns and hand signals. Men who fight as if they are stepping out of themselves and into something older. Men who roar, bite their shields and rush the line like fire spilling from a crack. They are called berserkers, and even the bold go quiet at the name. You watch the firelight ripple across carved beams while a skald begins a verse. He sings of bear shirts and wolfskins, warriors who take the animal as totem and second soul. He says Odin chose them, filling their chests with a storm that iron could not bite and flame could not touch. On the morning of battle they howl like wolves and roar like bears. They clamp teeth on the shield rim until splinters and blood mix. Then they run forward where other men hesitate. But the story does not end at the clash. When the frenzy drains, the skald says they fall limp like children. Afterward they shake, faint, or sleep as if the spirit has left their bones. Even friends stand back from them then, unsure which spirit will return and which will stay gone. You step outside to the beach where a dragon-prowed longship waits on greased logs. At the prow stand 12 men beneath hides of wolf and bear. They do not joke, boast, or drink. They breathe in time, jaws working at the shield rims in a rhythm that sounds like a drum you cannot hear. It looks like madness from a distance. Up close it looks like a ritual. Researchers today would call this state a trance, a dissociative focus built by rhythm, breath, and rehearsed signals. They speak of psychomotor automatism, actions cued from below conscious thought. In this state pain dulls, fear loosens, and strength feels unbound. The body is still human, but inhibition is not, and when the cue ends, exhaustion crashes through like a broken wave. You have heard people blame mushrooms for the fury. the red-capped flyer Garrick most of all. That theory began centuries after the sagas were written, and it still travels well in taverns and on modern pages, but the sources do not mention mushrooms for these men, not once. And the most poisonous candidates would more likely make a fighter slow, sick, or confused. A trance built by ritual fits the descriptions better, and it explains the collapse that follows. Older writers noticed men like this long before the Vikings carved dragons on their ships. A Roman named Tacitus wrote of night-fighting northerners who terrified with noise, paint and shock. A Byzantine historian called Procopius described Heruli from the north, who went near naked into battle to shame their wounds. These are not the same as berserkers, but they sketch a northern tradition of elite shock fighters who scorn armour and court fear. The line from those reports to later saga descriptions is not straight, but the echoes are clear enough to notice. Archaeology hints too in metal stamped long before these halls were built. Tiny dies from Öland, the Torslunda plates, show helmeted figures with animal crests and a dancer beside a spear. Scholars debate the exact scene, but the pairing of warrior, animal and ritual is hard to miss. Even a medieval chess set found on Lewis shows a shield biter frozen in ivory mid-grimace. It seems the image of the frenzy was vivid enough to carve for game and memory alike. In lore codes from Christian Iceland, the old fury becomes a problem to manage, not a gift to praise. The Grugga speaks of punishing a raging berserker, to bind him or drive him out. The church calls what the Skald called holy by another name entirely. Demons where gods once stood, crime where ritual once lived, and slowly the brotherhood that once took service under kings slides toward outlawry in the new moral light. Yet even Christian scribes preserved poems that remembered the charge. In a verse honouring King Harold Fairhair and the fight at Hafrsfjord, a skald praises roaring berserkers and wolf heathens who howled. The words carry teeth, breath and metal in their rhythm. You can feel a poet's awe for men who frighten iron itself. You can feel a scribe's caution as he copies lines about howling men decades later under a cross. Commanders used these fighters like fire at the prow in a sea fight or at the point of a shield wall on land. First in, loudest in, hardest to stop. Useful and dangerous, because a fire can jump the trench you cut for it. At Stickelstad in 1030, a king put his fiercest men up front and told them to hold. They rushed instead. The line broke where it needed to lock, and a crown fell because fury does not always listen. Families sometimes bred reputations as well as sons. Sagas trace tempers like bloodlines. Grandfathers who turned wild at dusk, fathers who fought bareheaded, sons who learned to bite the rim before their first beard. The word berserk grows beyond the men who wore skins to describe any fighter who suddenly moves like a storm. A king at Stamford Bridge in 1066 goes berserk in a last defiant surge. The phrase lives even where the brotherhood does not. Back on the sand, the shield biters inhale together and go still. You notice how quiet their stillness is, how it cools the world around them like a shadow. If you could step into a researcher's vocabulary, you would talk about breath patterns, entrainment and ritualized cues. If you could step into a skald's, you would talk about Odin bending close to put a storm in their ribs. Both lenses describe the same sight from different shores of the same water. Night leans in and the fjord turns to black glass. Inside the longhouse, the herd drinks and sings steady songs of oaths and winters and silver. Their order is a comfort, rows of spears, measured steps, clear commands, but sleep tugs at you with a different music. the memory of teeth on wood and breath like a drum. You lie down again and feel the cold through the floorboards like a second pulse. Somewhere in the timber a knot pops and you startle as if a horn had sounded. Then the hush returns and your jaw unclenches and your hands open. The historian's voice follows you into drowse like a soft second narrator. Berserkers likely existed as small cadres of elite shock troops bound by ritual practice and belief. The mushroom story is late and not in the sources. The trance story fits what the texts describe: the howling, the shield biting, the numbness to pain, and the collapse. The sagas keep their memory, but the Christian law codes fence it. Archaeology gives us images that rhyme with the poems, and language keeps the spark in a single word we still use when someone loses themselves to a moment. Your eyes drift closed and the fjord becomes a quiet road of sleep. The dragon prow waits on the sand like a thought you can come back to. The warriors in hides fade into shadow. Only the rhythm remains: breath, wave, ember, breath. The north settles around you like a cloak, and the truth about fury settles too. Part ritual, part memory, part man, part myth. You sleep to the history that still knows how to howl. Morning breaks slowly over the north. The frost outside the longhouse crunches under the feet of men preparing for the day. Inside, the coals of the hearth glow faintly red, sending curls of smoke toward the rafters. You pull the fur tighter across your shoulders and listen to the low hum of voices. Something lingers in the air. It is not the smell of smoke or pine. It is something older, a vibration left over from the night before, the memory of howls, the memory of men who seemed less than human and more than human, all at once. This was the Brotherhood of Fury, not the regular warriors who swore oaths of service to a lord in exchange for silver rings, not the household troops who guarded the king's hall. This was a circle within the circle, a band apart, bound less by loyalty to crown or coin, and more by their connection to each other and to something unseen. The sagas say they gathered in groups of 12, a number echoing myth and ritual, 12 at the prow of a ship, 12 at the side of a king, 12 in the dim light of the hall set apart from the others, always marked, always distinct. The ordinary warriors feasted and drank. The berserkers sat quietly, or else rocked and muttered to themselves, already entering the place between waking and dream. In sea battles they were placed at the prow. At Hafrsfjord in the late 9th century, King Harald Fairhair sent them forward as the tip of his attack. At Stiklestad in 1030, St. Olaf placed them at the front of his phalanx. They were the spearhead, the shock troops, the edge of the blade, but the sources warn that they were double-edged. Placed at the front, they could overwhelm the enemy, but they could also break free, slip from formation, and turn the battle to chaos. Olaf himself learned that lesson. At Stiklestad, his berserkers charged too soon, their fury too fierce to control. They shattered the line, but in their frenzy they exposed the king's own flank. The sagas say their wild assault helped bring about Olaf's death. This is the paradox of the Brotherhood. Invincible, yet uncontrollable. Useful, yet dangerous. But before the battles, before the blood, came the ritual. The sources describe it again and again. The biting of shields, the howls like wolves, the chest beating until bruises blossomed purple and black, the striking of swords against stones until sparks flew in the dark, the air filled with the clang of iron, the rhythm of fists, the growls of men turning themselves into beasts. It was not madness, though it may have looked like it. It was preparation. The shield biting was more than a grotesque display. It was a way of entering trance. The pressure of teeth, the pain in the jaw, the taste of wood and iron, together they pushed the mind away from ordinary thought. The howl summoned the wolf spirit. The bear cloaks draped over shoulders carried the strength of the beast. Each motion, each noise, was a key unlocking another layer of the frenzy. The sagas reinforced this image. In Grettir's saga, men are described as wolf heathens, clad in pelts, their roars so terrifying that iron could not bite them. In the Volsunga saga, Odin's chosen guard are described as mad as dogs and wolves. They went without armour. They bit shields until splinters filled their mouths. They killed without hesitation, and when the trance ended they collapsed as weak as children. The pattern was clear, repeated across tales. Modern researchers study these passages carefully. Some suggest the rituals worked like group hypnosis. By acting together, the men reinforced each other's trance. The howls, the rhythms, the pain, they overwhelmed rational thought. This was not chemical intoxication, but social and psychological entrainment. Anthropologists compare it to shamanic ceremonies. The shield became the drum, the growl became the chant, and in that state the berserker crossed into something else. To the people of the time this was sacred. They believed the berserkers were filled with Odin's spirit. Odin himself was the god of fury, of frenzy, of poetic inspiration and madness. To serve him was to walk the line between wisdom and rage. The bear and the wolf were his animals, his symbols of strength and cunning. When the berserker put on the hide, he was not pretending. He was becoming. Archaeology gives glimpses of this belief. On the Torslunda plates from Öland dated to the 7th century, warriors appear clad in animal skins, dancing in ritual poses. One figure wears a wolfskin, his eyes wide, his stance tense with energy. Another wears a bearskin, towering, massive, impossible to ignore. These are not costumes in the modern sense, as they are symbols of transformation. To wear the skin was to wear the spirit, and so the brotherhood formed its own identity, not just as soldiers, but as liminal beings, half man, half beast, half here, half elsewhere. The regular warriors might boast of strength. The berserkers had no need. Their power was evident in their very presence. They radiated danger, even in stillness. The sagas even describe chess pieces shaped like berserkers biting their shields. One set found on the Isle of Lewis shows warriors carved with bulging eyes, jaws locked on their shields in eternal frenzy. Even in games they symbolized unstoppable force. To move such a piece across the board was to summon the image of shield-biting warriors leading the charge. And families carried the title. The sagas tell us of Egil Skallagrimsson, whose father Skallagrim and grandfather Kveldulfur were both berserkers. It was not only a role, but sometimes an inheritance. Bloodlines of fury passed from father to son, whole families marked by Odin's touch. But the brotherhood was more than lineage. It was choice. It was ritual. It was belonging to a group feared and revered in equal measure. Ordinary warriors ate and drank. Berserkers entered trance, biting shields, howling into the night, preparing themselves to blur the line between man and beast. And in that liminal state they became something more than soldiers. They became symbols of fury itself. As you sit by the hearth, you can almost hear them again. The thud of fists on shields, the snap of jaws on iron rims, the low growl building into a howl, the air vibrating with rhythm and rage. It is unsettling, but it is also magnetic. You cannot look away. You understand why men followed them. and why kings both valued and feared them. For the Berserkers were not just fighters, they were a force of nature, a storm in human form, a brotherhood apart whose rituals bound them closer to each other than to any king. A circle within the circle, always present, always dangerous, always remembered. But rituals are one thing, battle is another. To see them in the hall is to feel unease. To see them on the battlefield is to feel terror. And so the sagas turn from preparation to action, from trance to clash, from ritual to war. And that is where we go next. From the brotherhood of fury to the fury itself unleashed. From the quiet growl of the hall to the roar of the battlefield, from ritual to reality. The morning mist clings to the fjord. The air is sharp, filled with the smell of wet pine and iron. You hear the scrape of shields, the rasp of swords being drawn from leather. The ordinary warriors move in formation, forming the shield wall shoulder to shoulder, but at the front the berserkers stand apart. Their eyes are wild, their chests heave. They are already half gone, already somewhere else. This is the trance, the state the sagas describe as fury beyond reason, a place where pain no longer matters, where fear dissolves, where strength grows unnatural. The berserkers howl, some roar like bears, others snarl like wolves. The sound carries across the field, unsettling even seasoned fighters. The enemy shifts uneasily. The battle has not begun, yet already they feel the storm. At Stiklestad in 1030, King Olaf's berserkers took the front of his line. The enemy numbered more, but the berserkers charged before the order was given. Their frenzy could not be contained. They smashed into the opposing shield wall, roaring, biting, striking with inhuman strength. For a moment, the enemy staggered. Even outnumbered, the berserkers cut through, their fury greater than fear. But without discipline, their force broke the king's formation. What began as unstoppable rage became chaos. The king was left exposed. The sagas say this helped bring about his death. This is the paradox of the trance. It could turn men into weapons of terror, but it could also undo the very army that unleashed them. A sword too sharp cuts both ways. At Hafrsfjord, a century earlier, the story was different. Harald Fairhair sought to unify Norway under his rule. In that sea battle, berserkers filled the prows of ships. They stood at the very front, cloaks of fur snapping in the wind, their howls carried over the waves. When ships crashed together, they leapt forward, axes biting, shields splintering. Enemies faltered, not just at the blows, but at the sight of men who seemed to feel no pain, who roared like animals, who fought as if already dead and reborn. The berserkers became shock troops of victory. The sagas say their howls could be heard above the crash of waves and the clash of steel. And at Stamford Bridge in 1066 across the sea in England, the fury appeared again. The Anglo-Saxon Chronicle tells of one Norse warrior who held the bridge alone, swinging his axe, cutting down dozens before he fell. Some believe he was a berserker. The description fits. A man beyond fear, beyond pain, filled with trance and strength. His stand delayed the English long enough for his comrades to form a line. Even in defeat, the berserker's fury shaped the battle. Imagine standing across from such men. You hold your shield tight, your feet dig into the mud. You have trained for this moment, sworn oaths sharpened your blade, but then you hear them, the howls, the growls, the biting of shields until splinters fly. They beat themselves bloody before the fight even begins, and you wonder, what kind of men do this? What kind of men make themselves into beasts before battle? The fear creeps in before the first clash. That fear was as much a weapon as any axe. The Berserkers' trance was not only for themselves, it was for their enemies. To see men immune to pain, men who laughed at wounds, men who fell into frenzy, it was enough to break morale. An army does not collapse when its shields break. It collapses when its courage breaks, and the Berserkers specialized in breaking courage. The sagas emphasize this again and again. They tell of berserkers who howled like dogs, who bit trees, who struck stones, who killed each other while waiting for war. Their violence was too large to contain. Even without enemies, they overflowed with rage. To stand against them was to face not only warriors, but forces of nature. Researchers today see the psychology at work. They describe the trance as dissociation, a state where awareness narrows, where pain dulls, where strength feels limitless. In modern terms, it is adrenaline magnified, inhibition stripped away. Some soldiers today speak of similar states in combat. Time slows, sounds sharpen, fear vanishes. The Berserkers took that natural human response and ritualized it, exaggerated it, sanctified it. They made adrenaline into a religion. But the sagas insist on the cost. After the trance came collapse. The berserker, once unstoppable, would fall like a child, trembling, weak, spent. They poured everything out in the storm, leaving nothing behind. Strength beyond measure had a price, and the price was exhaustion. Picture it now. The shield walls clash. The berserkers leap forward, axes rising and falling, blood spraying, howls tearing the air. For minutes they are unstoppable. You see one take a spear through the arm and not flinch. You see another strike down 3 men in the space of a breath. The enemy falters, steps back, fear in their eyes. But then, when the rage burns out, the berserkers stumble. Their arms hang heavy, their legs tremble, they sag against their shields. And in that moment they are no longer gods. They are men, exhausted, broken, vulnerable. This cycle, fury then collapse, defined them. It made them both revered and feared. Kings valued them for their shock power, but kings also feared their instability. How do you command men who cannot be commanded? How do you trust warriors whose fury might turn on you as easily as on the enemy? The sagas remember both sides. At times, berserkers are heroes. At other times, they are villains, outlaws, uncontrollable forces. They are admired for courage and despised for recklessness. They are Odin's chosen and society's threat. They live in tension between glory and chaos. Modern readers may struggle to believe such men existed, but the sagas are consistent, the poems insistent, the artifacts suggestive. Men did enter trance, men did howl, bite, rage, collapse. Whether their fury made them invulnerable is debatable, but that they believed in their fury and that others feared it is undeniable. And so the trance becomes more than battle technique. It becomes identity. To be a berserker was not only to fight differently, it was to live differently, to embrace fury as faith, to carry Odin's madness into the field, to terrify enemies not only with weapons but with presence itself. You watch them on the field. You feel the earth tremble with their charge. You see the shield wall crack under their blows. You hear the roars echo across the valley, and you know you are seeing something rare, not just men, but men who have stepped into legend before your eyes. Yet even legends have limits. The trance cannot last forever. The collapse always comes, and when it does, the berserkers must reckon with the price of their fury. That reckoning comes next. The battlefields fade, but the image remains. Men who fight like animals. Men who wear the hides of beasts. men who blur the line between human and something other. This is the heart of the Berserker mystery. The sources speak often of bears and wolves. Berserkers are described in two forms. Some wore bearskins, called berserker, literally bear shirts. Others wore wolfskins, called ulfedna, wolf coats. Together they were bound by the spirit of the animal. Each skin was more than clothing, it was transformation. The bear was strength. The bear was the unmatched power of the forest, roaring, unyielding, impossible to ignore. To wear the bear was to embody raw might, to become a towering figure on the field, blows glancing off as if the hide itself granted protection. The wolf was cunning. The wolf was the hunter of night, the pack creature, silent until the moment of the strike. To wear the wolf was to embody speed, coordination, merciless precision, to fight not as one but as part of a greater pack. The sagas often blur the distinction. Sometimes berserkers and wolfskins are the same, other times they are separate orders, but always they carry animal spirits, always they are closer to beasts than ordinary men. The Volsunga saga describes Odin's lifeguard. It says they went without armour, as mad as dogs and wolves, as strong as bears or oxen. They bit shields, they killed indiscriminately. Neither fire nor iron could hurt them. The image is clear, these were not just men. They were men who had stepped into the bodies of beasts. In Grettir's saga, wolf heathens appear again. They wear hides as mail. They roar until weapons tremble. The sagas paint them as uncanny. Flesh clothed in fur, men speaking in the voices of animals. It is unsettling, but it is also powerful. To fight them was to face both man and beast at once. Archaeology supports the imagery. The Torslunda plates from Uland show warriors in animal masks and cloaks, locked in ritual poses. One figure appears with a wolf's head, his arms raised, his stance ready for battle dance. Another bears the face of a beast larger than life, his cloak flowing like fur. These plates are 7th century, older than the sagas, yet echoing the same belief. Men could take on the spirit of beasts. And then there are the Lewis chessmen. Carved in the 12th century, they include figures biting their shields, their eyes bulging with frenzy. They may be ordinary warriors, they may be echoes of berserkers, but their feral expressions suggest the line between man and beast had not been forgotten. Even in games, the image of fury remained. The connection to Odin deepens the symbolism. Odin was not only the god of wisdom and poetry, he was also the god of fury, of war, of the shapeshifter's path. He could change form into eagle or serpent, bear or wolf. His followers sought the same gift. The berserkers, by donning hides, were not just dressing as animals. They were following Odin's own example. They were becoming his chosen. Scholars of religion see totemism here. The animal skin acts as mediator. The man wears it, and in wearing it, he becomes it. The spirit of the beast flows into the flesh. Strength is borrowed, cunning is adopted, the warrior is transformed. But transformation came at a cost. The sagas describe men who could not leave the beast behind. Some killed each other while waiting for war. Some attacked trees and rocks in frenzy, unable to distinguish battle from world. When the line between man and beast blurred too far, chaos followed. You imagine sitting near the fire watching them prepare. One drapes a bearskin across his shoulders. The head of the bear rests over his own, teeth bared, eyes hollow. For a moment you cannot tell where man ends and bear begins. Another pulls a wolfskin tight. The ears rise, the muzzle shadows his face, and his eyes gleam from the hollow sockets. He grins, and it is the grin of a predator. The other warriors avoid looking too closely. They glance, then look away. Respect and fear blend together. For to see such men is to wonder, are they still human at all? The Brotherhood understood this effect. They cultivated it. The fear was part of their power. An enemy who sees not a man but a beast is already half defeated. The cloak was armour, not of leather or iron, but of psychology. It turned perception into weapon. Modern researchers study this carefully. Some see it as performance. By dressing as beasts, the berserkers signalled their identity, heightened their frenzy, and terrified their opponents. Others see genuine belief that the spirit of the animal truly filled them. The truth may lie between. Belief and performance reinforcing one another until the man himself could no longer tell the difference. This duality, man and beast, belief and act, is what makes the berserker so enduring. They were not simply strong warriors, they were liminal figures, beings who crossed categories. Men who carried the edge of chaos within them, too human to be gods, too beastly to be men. You sit in the hall and you feel the tension. The ordinary warriors eat, laugh, boast. The berserkers sit apart, cloaked in fur, eyes distant. They are part of the gathering, yet not of it. They are here, yet elsewhere. It is like sitting beside a storm cloud waiting to break. The sagas never call them mad. They call them different. They ascribe to them a nature that was both feared and respected, a nature closer to the wild than to the hearth. This nature made them indispensable in war, but it also made them impossible in peace. And so the line between beast and man was not only ritual, it was fate. To be a berserker was to live on the edge of categories, to embody both courage and chaos, both strength and danger. It was to belong to Odin and not to ordinary society. You watch them now, firelight flickering on fur, shadows lengthening. One growls softly, almost without meaning to. Another gnaws his shield, splinters catching in his beard. They look up at once, their eyes catching yours. For a moment you feel as you are prey. The gaze is too sharp, too hungry. You look away quickly, heart pounding. This is the Brotherhood's truth. They were men, yes, but also beasts. And in crossing that line they became something neither fully one nor the other. Something society both needed and feared. Something destined to live in story as much as in flesh. And as the fire burns low, you sense the next turn of the tale. Because every frenzy ends, every storm must break. What happens when the trance is spent? What happens when the beast is gone and only the man remains? The sagas do not only speak of individual berserkers, they speak of families, of lineages where the rage ran as deep as blood, where fathers, sons and grandsons all carried the same dangerous gift. One of the most famous is Egil Skallagrimsson. He was a poet, a farmer, a warrior, and sometimes a killer. But he was also remembered as the son and grandson of berserkers. His father was Skallagrim, his very name meaning ugly skull. And his grandfather was Kveld Ulfa, the night wolf. Both were known for rages that burst like storms at dusk. The sagas say Kveld Ulfa was a mild man by day, but when evening came his mood darkened, his strength surged, and he became dangerous to all around him. It was as if the night itself stirred something inside him, the wolf waiting to prowl. Skallagrim inherited the same fury. He was said to have gone berserk while playing games with his son. In one saga, he crushed a boy during sport, his rage uncontrollable, his strength too much for play. Only afterward did he return to himself, horrified at what he had done. The berserk state was not always confined to the battlefield. Sometimes it spilled into the home. Egil, the grandson, carried both the poet's gift and the berserker's fury. He wrote verses as sharp as swords, but he also flew into trances that terrified friend and foe alike. The sagas tell of him at 12 years old, already killing a man in anger. By adulthood he was feared not only for his poetry, but for his unpredictable strength. These stories suggest that berserk nature could be passed down, not simply through training or ritual, but through blood. Like hair colour or height, the berserker rage seemed hereditary. Families became marked by it, known for it, respected and feared in equal measure. Modern scholars read these tales carefully. They see hints of genetic inheritance, perhaps disorders of mood or impulse, conditions where rage came quickly, strength surged, and restraint failed. What the sagas described as Odin's gift may have been a cluster of traits that ran in certain families. In today's words, inherited temperaments, psychiatric conditions, even neurological patterns. But to the Norse mind there was no diagnosis, only the explanation of spirit and blood. And it was not only Egil's line. The sagas tell of many families marked by fury, fathers who taught sons how to bite the shield, grandfathers who wore wolfskins watching their descendants do the same, lineages where the berserk nature became part of identity, something expected as much as inherited. In a society where honour and reputation were everything, this legacy mattered. To be from a berserker family was to carry both glory and danger. Glory because your kin were known as fierce fighters. Danger because people wondered if your rage might one day turn on your own hall. The sagas preserve moments when berserk fury appeared outside the battlefield. At feasts, men might drink too much and slip into the trance. At games, strength might become violence. Even within families, rage could flare without warning. It is one reason why berserkers could never fully belong in Christian society. Their fury did not respect walls or laws. It was a storm that could break anywhere. Yet the sagas do not always condemn these families. They also admire them. They admire Egil's poetry, his courage, his independence. They admire the sheer force of his ancestors, even when it frightened others. The berserker legacy was double-edged, but it could bring honour as much as fear. The phrase to go berserk began to stretch beyond the brotherhood itself. By the time of Harald Hardrada, it was used to describe any man who fought with sudden, unstoppable rage. At the Battle of Stamford Bridge in 1066, chroniclers wrote that Harald went berserk before falling. He was not part of the old brotherhood, but the word had grown to describe the state of fury itself. The family inheritance had become a cultural one. This tells us something important about memory. The berserker nature was not only tied to individual warriors or clans, it became a symbol for the whole culture, a way of naming that dangerous, powerful side of humanity that could erupt in anyone. What was once a family trait became a metaphor for fury itself. You sit in the longhouse and imagine how this felt in daily life. To be known as the son of a berserker, to have neighbours glance at you nervously, wondering if your father's rage would bloom in you. To feel the weight of both pride and suspicion, it shaped identity as much as sword or plough. These sagas did not call berserkers insane. They treated them as a different kind of man, marked by nature, feared and respected at once. In modern terms, we might call it pathology. In theirs, it was destiny. To be born with fury in your blood was to live on the edge of man and beast. and so the stories of these families kept the memory alive. Even as Christian law condemned berserkers, the sagas continued to tell of fathers and sons who carried the rage. They became reminders of a pagan past, a past where God still walked among men and the animal inside was not hidden but embraced. The families of fury show us that berserkers were not only individuals, they were part of a wider social fabric woven into memory and myth. Their legacy shaped language, reputation and culture long after their howls had faded. But where did this legacy begin? The sagas point to Viking times, but older echoes whisper from further back. Roman writers, Byzantine historians, fragments of archaeology, all hint at precursors to the berserkers in earlier centuries. To follow the trail, you must step into the shadows before the Viking Age. That is where the origins of the fury may be found. To understand the berserkers, you must step back in time, back before the Viking Age, before the long ships cut across seas, before Odin was the name on every warrior's lips. The roots of the fury stretch deeper into the shadows of earlier centuries. The first written hints do not come from Scandinavia itself, they come from Rome. In the 1st century AD, the historian Tacitus wrote a book called Germania. It was his attempt to describe the tribes who lived beyond the Roman frontier. The Germans, the Goths, the strange peoples of the north. Among them, he described warriors who fought with a wildness that seemed unearthly. Elite fighters who threw themselves into battle, fearless and untamed. They were not yet called berserkers, but the pattern is already there. Tacitus spoke of men who rejected heavy armour. They fought almost naked, clad in little more than animal skins. They scorned wounds, despised protection, and courted danger. To Roman eyes, this was madness. But to the tribes themselves, it was courage. It was a demonstration that pain meant nothing, that death itself was no threat. Centuries later, another voice adds to the picture. Procopius, a Byzantine historian of the 6th century, wrote about the Heruli. They were a northern people, likely from Denmark or southern Norway. He described them as wild and lawless. They went into battle wearing little more than loincloths. They carried only light shields, no helmets, no mail. It was a naked defiance of wounds, a living declaration of fearlessness. The Heruli did not stay confined to Scandinavia. Many served as mercenaries in the Roman army. Bands of them fought far from home, their strange customs bewildering southern generals. They were said to laugh at pain, to scorn death, to charge with reckless fury. It is here, in these mercenary bands, that some scholars see the seed of the berserker tradition. Men from the north, carrying with them a culture of wild combat and ritual defiance. By the 6th century, the Heruli had carved out their own kingdom on the Danish island of Finn. It lasted only a short time, but their name lingered in Roman memory. They were the barbarians who fought like no others. Some historians suggest that when the Heruli disappeared from Roman chronicles, their descendants continued in Scandinavia. Their ways may have merged with local warrior cults, eventually flowering into what we know as the berserkers. Archaeology gives its own faint testimony. Carvings from Sweden and Denmark show figures clad in skins dancing or fighting in ritual poses. The Torslanda plates made centuries before the Viking Age depict warriors with animal masks. A man with a spear stands beside a figure wearing a wolfskin, jaws still visible. To some, it looks like Odin himself beside one of his wolf warriors. To others, it is an early glimpse of berserkers in their earliest form. These images suggest that the fusion of man and beast was not a sudden Viking invention. It was already part of the North's imagination, long before longships sailed. Animal skins, ritual dance, battle trances, all were older than the Viking Age. The Berserkers were inheritors of something ancient, not inventors of something new. It is worth remembering that Northern Europe was filled with cults of animals. Totems were not just decoration, they were power. A bear or a wolf was not only feared, it was revered. To wear its skin was to claim its essence. To fight like it was to step into its spirit. The Berserkers belonged to Odin, yes, but even before Odin, men believed beasts could inhabit their bodies. Historians trace these traditions further back still. Long before sagas were written, Indo-European tribes practiced ecstatic rites. Warriors would drink, chant, and whip themselves into frenzy before combat. Across cultures, the pattern repeats. Ritual madness as a weapon. The Berserkers were simply the Scandinavian form of this ancient practice. They gave it their own name, their own god, their own sagas. But the roots were pan-human, stretching across lands and centuries. When Christianity came north, these roots became shadows. The old rituals were demonized. The animal skins were mocked as superstition. The frenzy was called possession, not power. But beneath the condemnations, echoes of the older practices remained, and those echoes filtered into the sagas. You can feel the weight of time when you think about it. Tacitus in the 1st century, marvelling at wild northern fighters. Procopius in the 6th, shocked by naked Heruli charging with only shields. Swedish metal plates showing wolf-masked men in ritual dance. All fragments scattered across centuries, but when you hold them together they form a pattern. A shadowy lineage leading straight into the Viking Age. The Berserkers were not created overnight. They were the flowering of traditions older than memory. The trance, the animal spirit, the fearless charge. All of it had been seen before. But in the Viking Age it found a new form, and it found a new word, berserker, bear shirt, the name by which they would be remembered forever. Modern researchers caution us not to romanticize. These were not noble superheroes. They were men shaped by ritual, belief and culture. Their fury was powerful, but it was also dangerous. It made them mercenaries, outlaws, sometimes criminals. Yet it also made them legends, and legends rarely vanish. As you stand in this long shadow of history, you sense the weight of unanswered questions. How exactly did the trance begin? What rituals opened the door? Were herbs or mushrooms involved? Or was it entirely the work of mind and will? Those questions linger, because the sources are silent. But theories have grown in the silence, theories about mushrooms, madness and mind. And those theories are where the story turns next. From archaeology and ancient chronicles you will now step into speculation, into the strange world of fly agaric mushrooms, Siberian shamans, and the search for an explanation of berserk fury. The shadows of the past give way to the bright red cap of the mushroom, and with it, another possible key to the trance. Firelight before battle. The longhouse is warm tonight. The air is heavy with the smell of pine smoke and roasted meat. The benches are crowded with warriors, their voices low and rough. But at the far end of the hall 12 men sit apart. The Berserkers. They do not feast as the others do. They do not laugh or trade boasts. They are quiet as though listening to something beyond the hall. Their eyes glimmer in the firelight, distant, unfocused, already half in another world. A skald begins to sing. His voice rises with the smoke, telling of Odin, of wolves, of the Warfather's endless hunger. The men nod. Some whisper the god's name under their breath. lips moving as if in prayer. Others drum their hands against the table, steady, rhythmic, like the beat of war drums. One berserker pulls the rim of his shield to his mouth. He bites down hard. The crunch of wood echoes in the hall. Another throws back his head and howls. The sound rattles the rafters, makes the children in the shadows clutch their mothers tighter. But no one stops him. This is their way. This is how the trance begins. The firelight flickers across fur cloaks. Bearskins ripple in the heat. Wolfskins seem almost alive in the glow. For a moment you could believe you're not looking at men at all. You could believe you are looking at animals in human form. Their shoulders hunch, their jaws tighten, their breath quickens. The line between man and beast blurs. The others in the hall fall quiet. They watch, uneasy, as the berserkers sway in rhythm with the skald's song. The song grows faster, sharper, louder, and with it the berserkers begin to rock, to growl, to stamp their feet. The benches creak, the shields rattle. The trance is building. You sit near the fire and feel it too. The air seems thicker, hotter, as though the flames have grown taller. The howls rise, the shield biting grows harsher, the rhythm of the table drums faster. It is like a storm gathering, not outside but inside the men themselves, and you feel caught in its pull, as though it might sweep you up as well. Then suddenly silence. The song ends. The berserkers slump, sweat dripping from their brows. The trance has not yet broken them, but it has touched them. They are half here, half somewhere else. The hall breathes again, but the silence feels heavy. It is the silence before battle. Outside, wolves howl in the distance. The sound drifts through the night air, echoing the growls still in the warriors' throats. The moon glimmers on the fjord, silver and cold. Tomorrow blood will be spilled. Tonight only the fire burns. You close your eyes and let the rhythm of the chants linger in your ears. The drumming, the howls, the crunch of teeth on wood. You feel the sway of the trance without moving. It pulls at your thoughts, heavy, drowsy, hypnotic. You drift as they drift toward another world. This is how the berserkers prepared, not with drink, not with drugs, not with idle talk, but with ritual, with rhythm, with fury, with trance, with firelight and shadows that blurred man and beast, and in that liminal place they readied themselves for the dawn. Tomorrow the theories will begin. Tomorrow questions of mushrooms and madness will rise, but tonight only the fire speaks. Only the howls remain, only the slow drift between waking and dream. The fire has burned low, the hall is silent, only the hiss of embers remains, and in that silence a question rises. What caused the berserker rage? For centuries people whispered answers. Some said the fury came from Odin himself. Others said it was madness. Still others searched for more earthly causes. And in the late 18th century, a priest gave one of the most enduring explanations. His name was Samuel Udman. In 1784, he proposed a theory that would echo for centuries. He suggested the berserkers ate mushrooms, specifically fly agaric, the red mushroom with white spots you still see in fairy tales. According to him, the trance, the frenzy, the shield biting, all of it came from hallucinogens. Udman drew on reports of Siberian shamans. He had read that they consumed fly agaric to enter visions. They shook, they howled, they acted beyond themselves. He compared this to descriptions of berserkers, and so he argued, perhaps the berserkers were not merely possessed by Odin, perhaps they were intoxicated. The theory caught on, generations repeated it. It was simple, tangible and colourful. It fit the image of wild men in fur cloaks, pupils dilated, lost in frenzy. Even today, many still believe the mushroom explanation. But problems appear quickly. Fly agaric is not a consistent drug. Its effects vary wildly from person to person. Some experience visions, others experience nausea, confusion or apathy, and the sagas never describe apathy. They describe fury, violence, unstoppable strength. The sagas also never mention mushrooms. They describe shield-biting, howling trance. They describe Odin's favour, animal skins, ritual preparations, but nowhere do they say the berserkers consumed strange plants before battle. This silence matters. If mushrooms were central, surely the poets would have sung of them. Other fungi have been suggested. Some mention white agaric, but it is dangerously poisonous, causing sickness and death rather than strength. Others mention ergot, a fungus on rye that contains compounds later used to create LSD. Ergot poisoning can cause convulsions, hallucinations, strange behaviour, but it can also cause paralysis and death. It seems unlikely that such a source created reliable warriors. Researchers today often dismiss the mushroom theories. They point instead to psychology. The shield biting, the howling, the rituals, they resemble trance induction. Through rhythm, pain, and group performance, the berserkers could have entered dissociation. In that state, they felt no pain, gained temporary strength, and lost fear. No mushroom needed. Think of modern parallels. Athletes speak of being in the zone, losing sense of time, feeling unstoppable. Soldiers in battle describe tunnel vision, adrenaline, altered states. Shamans across cultures use drumming, chanting, fasting, and exhaustion to enter trance. The berserkers fit into this global pattern. They were not intoxicated. They were entranced. Still, the mushroom image lingers. It is vivid, it is easy to imagine, it makes a good story. And in popular culture, vivid stories survive. So the red mushroom with white spots has become a symbol, as enduring as the bear and the wolf, even if history does not support it. You picture a berserker on the eve of battle. Does he kneel in the dirt, chewing strange fungi, waiting for visions? Or does he sit with his brothers, biting his shield, howling with the pack, drumming his fists until the trance takes him? The second image feels closer to the sagas, closer to the truth, closer to the rhythm of the whole you can almost hear. The mushroom theory tells us as much about us as about them. We look for chemical explanations where the past spoke of gods. We seek science where the sagas spoke of spirits. We want the berserkers to be intoxicated because intoxication we can understand. Trance is harder, ritual is stranger. Belief in Odin is foreign, but perhaps it is we who are limited, not them. One researcher wrote, "The berserker rage was self-induced hypnosis, not intoxication. The shield was the instrument, the howl was the chant, the fire was the drug, and the trance was real. Still, the mushroom theory endures. It will likely never vanish, because myths about myths have power too. Fly agaric will always glow red and white in the imagination. It will always tempt us to believe the berserkers found their fury in the forest floor. But the sagas remind us otherwise. They remind us of howls, shields, furs, and Odin. They remind us that fury can be called without poison, that trance can rise from rhythm and belief, that madness and magic can blur without mushrooms. So the truth lies somewhere in between. Perhaps some experimented with plants. Perhaps some stumbled upon Ergot's strange visions. But the Brotherhood's power did not depend on chance. It depended on ritual, on will, on trance. That was what made them consistent. That was what made them feared. You close your eyes and listen. The fire pops, the wind sighs against the hall, and beneath it all you hear the rhythm again, the beat of fists, the howl of wolves, the crunch of teeth on wood. Not mushrooms, not madness, only men transformed by fury, stepping into the space between beast and god. And as the fire burns lower, another question rises. What happened after the fury? When the trance ended, when the battle was over, when the howls went silent, what remained? The sagas give the answer. They speak of collapse. They speak of weakness. They speak of the crash that always followed the storm. The battle ends. The howls fade. The clash of shields and swords is replaced by groans and silence. And among the fallen, the berserkers collapse. The storm has passed. This was the other side of the trance. The sagas describe it again and again. After the frenzy, the warriors became weak. As weak as children, they staggered, trembled, and fell to the ground. Their bodies were spent, their strength gone. Picture it now. A berserker, moments ago unstoppable, stands breathing heavily. His chest heaves, his arms shake. He drops his sword. He leans against his shield. Then he collapses into the mud, unable to rise. The beast is gone. Only the man remains. The sagas note this contrast with fascination. Invulnerable one moment, fragile the next. Shield-biting fury giving way to trembling exhaustion. It was as if their power burned them from within, leaving them hollowed. Their trance was not endless. It always demanded payment. Modern researchers understand this as adrenal crash. In trance, the body floods with adrenaline and endorphins. Pain vanishes, strength increases, fear disappears, but the body cannot sustain this forever. When the chemicals fade, fatigue crashes in. Muscles ache, energy collapses, the mind struggles to focus. The berserkers experienced this intensely. Forensic psychiatry calls it psychomotor automatism, actions taken in trance without conscious control. When the state ends, exhaustion follows, sometimes sleep. The sagas describe berserkers falling into deep slumber after battle. Sleep as recovery, sleep as release, sleep as the only refuge after so much fury. Imagine the battlefield after Hafrsfjord. The sea is littered with broken ships, the shore with bodies. The ordinary warriors begin to regroup, tend wounds, gather the fallen, but the berserkers lie scattered, trembling, eyes closed, their breath shallow, their limbs heavy. For a while, they are useless. For a while, they are vulnerable. This vulnerability was dangerous. Enemies who survived could strike them down. Allies had to guard them, protect them, keep them alive until strength returned. Kings saw both the value and the risk. A weapon this powerful was also fragile, and fragility could cost battles. The sagas reflect this tension. They admire the berserker's fury, but they also remind us of the collapse. The berserker is never invincible for long. The frenzy is always temporary. The aftermath is always weakness. Some sagas describe berserkers as falling into melancholy after battle, a sadness, a hollowness, an emptiness once the trance is gone. Perhaps this was depression after adrenaline. Perhaps it was the weight of deeds committed in frenzy. The sagas do not explain. They only show men who once roared like wolves now sitting in silence, heads bowed. You picture sitting beside one. His beard is matted with blood. His shield is splintered, teeth marks in the rim. His eyes, once wild, are now vacant. He stares at nothing. When you ask if he's hurt, he shakes his head weakly. It is not wounds that weaken him. It is the trance itself. It has drained him utterly. The sagas even legislate this. In the Icelandic law code Gragas, raging berserkers are described as threats. If one endangered others, he could be bound, even exiled. His fury was dangerous, but his collapse was pathetic. The law recognized both sides, fear and weakness, terror and exhaustion. This duality made the berserker a paradox. To enemies, he was terror itself. To allies, he was sometimes a burden. He was hero and liability in one. The sagas never let us forget it. Modern psychology sees catharsis here. The trance allowed violent impulses to be released in ritualized form. Once released, the body collapsed. The berserker had nothing left to give. The rage was gone. The vessel was empty. In this way, the berserker was both more and less than human. More, because he could enter states of power others could not. Less, because he could not sustain them and was left weaker than ordinary men afterward. This was the cycle. This was the cost of touching the edge between man and beast. You imagine the hall after battle. The ordinary warriors boast, drink, sing of victory. The berserkers sit slumped, silent, drained. They eat little, speak little. Some fall asleep by the fire, unmoving. Their cloaks of fur look less like armour now and more like shrouds. This image lingers. The sagas wanted us to see both, the fury and the weakness, the storm and the calm, the man who could not be hurt and the man who could barely stand. Only by holding both can we understand them. It is easy to admire their fury. It is harder to acknowledge their collapse. But the collapse makes them human again. Without it, they would be monsters. With it, they are men. Men who gave everything to the trance and paid for it with exhaustion. And so the berserker stands as a reminder. Power always has a cost. Strength borrowed from trance must be repaid in weakness. The beast fades, the man remains, and the man is tired. So very tired. As the firelight flickers low, you see the cycle clearly. Ritual, trance, fury, collapse, again and again. Always ending the same way, in silence, in weakness, in sleep. The sagas knew this. The poets sang it. The law recognized it. The researchers confirm it. And so we move forward, from collapse to memory, from exhaustion to story, from men who once roared to legends that still whisper. The fury has ended, but the myth remains. The age of berserkers was never meant to last forever. Once Christianity spread through the north, their place on the battlefield dwindled. Their brotherhood faded, their rituals condemned, their service no longer desired. But their memory lived on, and in memory they changed. The sagas preserved them most vividly. Written down in Iceland centuries after the Viking Age, the sagas are windows into both past and imagination. They describe berserkers with awe and with unease, sometimes as heroes, sometimes as villains, always as figures who stood apart. In the Volsunga saga, they were Odin's lifeguard. They went without armour, as mad as dogs and wolves, biting shields, killing all in their path. They were fire and fury given form. In Greta's saga, they appeared as wolf heathens clad in hides, their howls echoing across battlefields. Even when cast as enemies, they were never ordinary. They were symbols of something larger, the dangerous edge of human nature. Skaldic poetry reinforced this. Harald Skavedi, sung for King Harold Fairhair, remembers berserkers roaring where battle raged. Wolf heathens howled, iron weapons trembled. It is short, but the words linger like thunder. The berserkers became part of royal propaganda. proof of a king's power, proof of Odin's favour. Yet in Christian sagas the tone shifts. Berserkers are no longer holy, they are thugs, pirates, outlaws. Men who duel recklessly, who spill blood without reason, who threaten peace. They are problems to be solved, villains to be punished, examples to be avoided. The same rituals once seen as divine become evidence of demonic possession. Law codes show this shift clearly. The Icelandic Gragos states that if a man went berserk, if his frenzy endangered others, he could be bound, exiled, or even killed. His state was not admired but feared, not a gift, but a crime. The law treated berserker rage as a social threat, something to be contained, not celebrated. And yet, condemnation did not erase fascination. Even when outlawed, their stories continued. Even when demonized, their images endured. The berserker became a mythic figure in the cultural memory of the North, both a warning and a wonder. It is telling that the sagas never called berserkers insane. They did not treat them as madmen. They treated them as a different category of being. Strange, dangerous, but not simply broken. This distinction matters. It means the berserkers were not dismissed as illness. They were respected as something other, a nature set apart. Modern historians read this as cultural framing. In a society that valued honour, courage and strength, the berserker could not be written off as madness. He had to be explained in terms of spirit and destiny. He was feared and admired, scorned and envied. He was a paradox society struggled to define, and in that struggle he became a story. As centuries passed, the berserker became less a memory of men and more a symbol. They stood for untamed rage, for fury that ignored laws, ignored reason, ignored bonds. They became shorthand for the wildness that still lurks in human hearts, a shorthand that outlived them in both word and legend. Because even when the men disappeared, the word remained. To go berserk was a phrase already used in sagas to describe ordinary warriors who lost themselves in fury. By the 13th century, it applied not just to the Brotherhood, but to any fighter who raged beyond control. By the modern age, it had broken free of the battlefield altogether. Today, when someone loses control, we still say they went berserk. The echo of the wolfskin warriors lives on every time the word leaves your lips. That survival tells its own story. The berserkers are not only historical, they are linguistic, they are mythic. They exist in memory, in metaphor, in language. Even without their bodies, they endure in imagination, and imagination is often stronger than flesh. You imagine hearing a saga sung aloud in a smoky Icelandic hall. The poet recites the names of men who bit shields, who howled like wolves, who collapsed like children when the fury passed. The audience shivers, even though the events happened centuries ago. The fear is still fresh, the awe is still sharp. The berserker, though long gone, is present in every word. This is the transformation, from warrior to myth, from man to symbol. From bloodied fighter on a battlefield to carved figure on a chess piece. The berserkers became larger than life because their stories made them so, and once a story grows large, it does not die. The berserkers stepped into legend. They became figures retold by poets, reshaped by priests, feared by lawmakers, remembered by children. They became warnings of excess, models of courage and symbols of fury all at once. That complexity kept them alive long after their howls fell silent. And so, as history gave way to myth, the berserkers became timeless. They still live in language, They still live in art, they still live in imagination, but they no longer live in flesh. Their transition is complete, yet the story does not end here, because myths drift. They expand, they soften, they fade into dreams. The Berserkers are no longer just remembered as warriors. They are drifting now into legend itself, where history blurs into the lull of story. And that is where your journey will close. The longhouse is quiet now. The fire has burned low, only embers glowing in the dark. Outside, the wind sighs against the walls, carrying the scent of pine and sea. The sagas have been told, the battles have been remembered, the fury has been sung, and what remains is silence. The Berserkers no longer stride across the field. They no longer howl at the moon or bite their shields. They belong to another time, to a time of Odin, of wolfskins, of pagan rites in smoke and blood. That time has passed, and with its passing the Berserkers drifted into memory. For a while their names were carried by families, fathers and sons remembered for strength, for sudden rages, for fury in their blood. But even those lineages faded. Christianity reshaped the North. Kings needed order, not chaos. Priests needed peace, not frenzy. And the Berserkers had no place in that world. Yet legends rarely vanish. They linger, reshaped, retold. The sagas preserved the memory. The poems sang of roaring, howling, trembling iron. The chessmen carved in ivory bit their shields forever. The word berserk slipped into language and never left. A word born of skins and howls carried into your own tongue today. Think of what it means. When someone loses control, you still say they went berserk. You summon 1,000 years of memory without even knowing it. The howl of a wolf warrior echoes faintly behind the word. The shield biting, the trance, the collapse, all compressed into those 2 syllables. History preserved in everyday speech. Modern researchers continue to search for explanations. Some insist on mushrooms, others on trance and psychology. Some see genetic inheritance, families cursed with fury. Others see ritual performance, group psychology, fear as armour. No single answer satisfies. Because the Berserkers were not only a phenomenon of flesh, they were also a phenomenon of story. And stories live longer than men. The Berserkers are no longer warriors. They are metaphors. They are legends of human extremes. They are reminders of what happens when rage is embraced, when fear is scorned, when trance takes hold. They are warnings, they are wonders, they are whispers in the night. You close your eyes and imagine sitting in a hall of stone and timber. The skald finishes his tale. The last notes of the poem fade into smoke. The fire cracks softly. The audience shifts, uneasy, thoughtful, inspired. For a moment everyone feels the presence of the Berserker, not in flesh, but in imagination. Then the hall grows quiet and the night grows deep. This is how legends drift. They begin as men of flesh. They fight battles, they wear skins, they bite shields. Then they are remembered in sagas reshaped by poets and priests. Then they are retold as myths, softened by centuries. And finally they drift into dreams, from warriors to stories, from stories to symbols, from symbols to shadows. Tonight, as you listen, the Berserkers drift further still. Their howls soften into the sigh of wind. Their shields fade into the hush of waves. Their rage dissolves into silence, and they settle not in battlefields but in your thoughts as you fall towards sleep. The truth of the Berserkers lies somewhere between myth and man. They were real, but their reality was reshaped. They fought, they howled, they collapsed. but they were also remembered as invincible, untouchable, unstoppable. In the tension between history and story, they became eternal. So now the fire dies down, the embers glow faintly, the sagas are finished, and the berserkers are gone. All that remains is the echo of their name, the whisper of their legend, the calm after their storm. Let that calm surround you now. Let the noise of history fade into the silence of night. Let the fury dissolve into rest. The berserkers have drifted into legend, and so may you drift into sleep. What the Vikings ate. You wake slowly beneath heavy furs. The air is cool and damp, carrying the mingled scents of wood smoke, pine, and something rich and earthy simmering nearby. When you open your eyes, you see the beams of a Viking longhouse arching above you like the ribs of a ship turned upside down. Smoke curls lazily from a central hearth, trailing upward through a hole in the roof where morning light drips in silver lines. Around you the household stirs. Children whisper, chasing each other softly over dirt floors dusted with straw. A dog thumps its tail against the wall, and from the hearth comes the sound of a wooden spoon scraping against an iron pot. The smell is thick, warm, filling, porridge. Vikings began their mornings not with feasts but with sustenance. Barley, oats and rye were staples of the north. Grain was ground into flour, boiled into gruel, baked into flatbreads. Today, the pot at the fire bubbles with barley porridge. A hand stirs it carefully, folding in goat's milk, a knob of butter and a drizzle of honey saved from last summer's combs. Sometimes dried berries are dropped in, staining the porridge with purple streaks, a rare splash of sweetness in a land of salt and smoke. You take a wooden bowl passed from hand to hand. The porridge is thick and steaming, sticky on the spoon. It tastes of earth and ash and warmth, a reminder that in this climate food is not simply comfort, it is survival. Beside the pot, a clay cup is filled with buttermilk, sharp, sour and refreshing. Others drink whey, the thin liquid left from making cheese. Nothing is wasted here. The longhouse fills with the soft sounds of breakfast, spoons tapping bowls, slurps of milk, the occasional laughter of children. Men eat quickly, knowing the fields and the fjords await. Women pace their portions carefully, ensuring enough is left for the youngest, the weakest, the elderly at the far end of the hall. Everyone eats, for hunger is never far in a northern winter. Not all meals are alike. In your hall of a wealthy chieftain, the porridge may be rich with cream, honey, and imported nuts. In the hut of a poor farmer, it may be thin, little more than water and grain, with smoke drifting through cracks in the roof and frost seeping under the door. But everywhere, in every home, the day begins with grain. You eat slowly, watching as smoke braids upward. The porridge is simple, but it binds the household together. It is fuel for long days, comfort against long nights, and a rhythm as steady as the tide. The Vikings knew it well. The strength of the morning bowl decides the strength of the day. Midday meals and work food. The bowl is empty now, scraped clean with the edge of your spoon. Around you, the household rises. Men lift their cloaks from wooden pegs. Women gather baskets. Children scatter toward chores. The longhouse, which only moments ago hummed with breakfast voices, now exhales into quiet as people leave for the day. You follow them outside. The air is sharp, mist rising from the fields beyond the fence. Here is where the food you just ate begins its life. Barley swaying in the wind, rye dark against the soil, oats waiting for harvest. In the distance, sheep graze. A shepherd whistles, the dog barking in answer. Every grain and drop of milk has its cost in labour, and the day stretches ahead filled with work. Midday meals are not feasts. They are food meant to be carried, food meant to last. A farmer walking behind a plough pulls a cloth bundle from his belt. Inside, flatbread baked thin over the hearth, chewy and tough, folded around dried fish. It smells faintly of smoke and sea. The bread crumbles, the fish flakes, but it fills the stomach and steadies the hands that grip the plough handles. Cheese is another companion of the fields. Hard, salted, and made to last weeks. A wedge can be wrapped in cloth, tucked into a pouch, eaten slowly while watching sheep or hauling nets. The salt keeps it safe, the fat keeps it filling, the sharp taste wakes you in the middle of labour. At the fjord, men preparing their longship chew dried meat, the tough strips softened in ale before eating. Ale is not luxury here. It is daily drink, safer than water drawn from shallow wells. Brewed from barley, it is weak by modern measure, but steady enough to carry sailors across days. You sip from a horn, and the taste is earthy, faintly bitter, with the warmth of grain still clinging to it. At sea, food must survive the waves. Stockfish, cod dried until it rattles like wood when struck, is hammered soft with an axe, then chewed in pieces. It is dry, tasteless, but it keeps men alive far from land. Sometimes it is dipped into broth warmed in an iron pot swinging over the ship's hearthstone. The broth smells of onions and herbs carried in small bundles from home, a reminder that even on the open sea, kitchens travel with the crew. Picture the deck of a ship in midday light. Men squat on their heels, chewing silently, eyes squinting at the horizon. Their hands hold dried bread, jerky strips of cheese. The sea wind tears at their cloaks, gulls cry overhead, and still the rhythm continues. Chew, swallow, breathe, row. Even food is part of the discipline of rowing. Back in the fields, midday stretches long. Children sit on fence posts, nibbling on hazelnuts gathered in autumn, cracking them between stones. Women weave while eating apples dried from last year's harvest, leathery and tart but sweet enough to share. The meals are humble, but they are woven into labour. No one here eats without work. Every bite carries the memory of sowing, tending, reaping, storing. In towns, the meals shift slightly. Merchants take bread and herring from stalls, eating quickly while counting silver. Craftsmen pause over their benches, sipping weak ale, biting into hunks of bread covered in butter or lard. Even in trade, food is constant motion. Eaten standing, eaten walking, eaten between tasks. Yet for all its simplicity, there is rhythm and comfort here. The same flatbread passed down generations. The same dried fish packed for sea voyages. The same cheese wheels turned and salted in dark storerooms. Each bite is part of a cycle, a calendar you can taste. The sun tilts, the fields quiet, the fjord glimmers. Stomachs are steadied for the afternoon's work. The day presses forward, hour by hour, chew by chew, and as evening approaches you know something larger waits, not the quick bite of the worker, but the gathering of the hall. Feasting and celebration. Evening falls and with it comes the feast. The longhouse glows with firelight. Smoke curls upward, flickering against carved beams, while outside the air is sharp with pine and sea. You step in and the warmth embraces you like a cloak. This is no workday meal of bread and dried fish. This is the centre of Viking social life. The tables stretch long, planks resting on trestles, benches packed with neighbours, warriors and kin. At the high seat the chieftain presides, a horn of ale in his hand. The air is thick with smells. Roasting meat drips fat into the fire, sizzling with sharp, savoury smoke. Stew pots bubble with lamb and onions, carrots and herbs, the broth heavy and rich. Flatbreads are stacked high, ready to be torn and dipped. The feast begins not with silence but with clamour. Horn after horn is raised. The ale flows freely, weak by modern measure but endless by quantity. It is golden, foamy, brewed from barley grown just beyond the walls. Honey mead is rarer but sweeter, thick with the sun of summer flowers. It slides warm down your throat, humming in your chest like a second fire. The meats are pride of place. Spits turn with pork, fat glistening, skin crackling to brown perfection. Cattle, when slaughtered, provide great joints of beef, boiled in cauldrons or roasted over flame. Mutton appears often, its flavour stronger, its fat thicker, but filling for long nights. Fish, too, shines at the feast. Salmon smoked until pink and tender, herring pickled sharp with vinegar and herbs. The feast is not only about food, it is about display. The chieftain distributes meat according to rank, slices of pork shoulder to honoured guests, the choicest cuts to allies. Each gift of food is also a gift of loyalty, a bond sealed by grease and ale. Skalds rise to sing. Their voices carry sagas of old, of Sigurd slaying the dragon, of Odin's endless quest for wisdom. The rhythm of words matches the rhythm of cups raised, meat carved, laughter echoing against timbered walls. Story and supper mingle, and the hall becomes both kitchen and theatre. Sweetness has its place too. Honey cakes fried in fat dusted with crushed nuts. Berries boiled down into thick jams, spooned onto bread or into bowls. Apples stewed with honey and spices, their fragrance rising above the smoke. Each taste balances the salt and fat of meat, a brief glimpse of summer even in winter. The noise grows. Men boast of battles, women trade gossip, children sneak bits of meat when their mothers are not looking. Dogs circle under the benches waiting for bones to fall. The hall is alive, roaring with voices, glowing with fire, trembling with song. At the centre, ritual takes place. The chieftain lifts a horn and makes a toast. To the gods, to the ancestors, to victory yet to come. Each guest drinks in turn, lips to rim, breath fogging the golden surface. The horn passes, the prayer is sealed, and the feast continues. But feasting is not endless abundance. Every cut of meat comes from animals raised with labour, slaughtered with ceremony, salted or smoked to last the winter. Every barrel of ale comes from grain painstakingly harvested, malted and brewed. Behind the revel lies the work, behind the laughter lies the labour. The feast is a momentary blaze in the long dark, a way of turning toil into joy. As the night deepens, the mood shifts. Songs slow into softer verses. The dogs curl near the fire, bellies full. Men lean on elbows, eyes heavy with drink. Women gather cups and platters, stacking them near the door. The great hall exhales once more, its heat fading as torches burn low. Outside the stars are sharp, the fjord dark as iron. Inside only embers glow. The feast is over, but its memory lingers. The smell of meat, the taste of mead, the warmth of kin. And tomorrow, when work resumes, the feast will be remembered as fuel, as joy, as story. Winter food and preservation. The seasons turn, and with them the rhythm of the table. Summer and autumn bring plenty, milk foaming in buckets, grains golden in fields, fish thick in the nets. But winter waits, long and lean. And to live through it, the Vikings learned to master the art of preservation. Step into the cool of a storage hut. The air smells of smoke and salt. Meat hangs from rafters, darkened by months above the hearth fire, fat hardened into a protective shell. Fish stiff as planks rattle on wooden racks. Cod turned to stockfish by the bite of wind. Barrels line the walls, brine sloshing around herring packed tight, their silver skins now pale from salt. Every method has its logic. Smoking dries and flavours, sealing meat in layers of fire's memory. Salting draws out water, creating a fortress against decay. Drying lets air do the work, leaving food hard but safe, ready to be softened in broth. Fermentation too plays its role. Cabbages souring into sharp tang, milk curling into skyr that keeps for months. Picture a family in January. The fjord is frozen at the edges, the fields buried in snow. No grain grows, no fresh berries appear. The evening meal is drawn from stores. A pot of dried peas softened in water, flavoured with a bone saved from autumn's slaughter. Flatbread baked thin weeks ago, now warmed against the hearth until pliable. Butter thick and yellow, cut from a crock kept cool in the snow. The food is simple, but it is survival. Even drink must be planned. Ale brewed in autumn must last the dark months. Casks are rolled into storage, sealed with pitch, guarded like treasure. When tapped in winter, the ale tastes of earth and malt, a reminder of summer fields locked away in wood. Mead when present is rarer still, honey too precious to waste often. Preservation is not only craft but ritual. Autumn slaughter was a time of sacrifice and celebration. Animals were killed before winter could starve them, their blood poured in offerings, their meat divided, salted, smoked. The act was both practical and sacred, a moment when survival and belief braided together. The sagas echo with this rhythm. They tell of feasts in autumn, of scarcity in spring, of the constant awareness that food was the border between life and death. 1 year of poor harvest could mean hunger for all. One failed net could starve a village. So storage was not just convenience. It was survival strategy written into daily life. You open a barrel and breathe the sharp tang of brined fish. You lift a lid and see butter sealed in clay pots, still rich beneath a crust of salt. You crack a dried cod with a hammer, flakes flying, then soak it in a pot until it loosens enough to chew. Every motion is part of the winter rhythm. Every smell reminds you of earlier seasons, of work stored for later. It is here in the quiet months that ingenuity shows most clearly. Stews stretch small supplies. Bread is baked with husks and ground bark when grain runs thin. Children chew pine resin as sweet, their jaws sticky with sap. What seems humble to us was cleverness then, ways of making little into enough. By the time the snow melts, the stores are nearly gone. Empty barrels clatter hollow. The last dried fish is scraped from the rack. The last bread is hard and thin. This hungry gap before spring's first shoots was feared, endured, prayed against. But those who planned well, salted carefully, smoked thoroughly, they survived. Winter food tells its own story of the Vikings. A story not only of warriors and voyages, but of families crouched near firelight, sharing stew scraped from the barrel, drinking ale brewed last autumn, thanking gods for the taste of survival. The feast may glitter in memory, but it is the preservation that carried lives through the dark. That completes chunk 4. Would you like me to add a final chunk 5? Food as identity and legacy. How Viking diet shaped culture, health and modern memory. To close the story at approximately 5,000 words total. You said. ChatGPT said. Perfect. Here's the closing section. Chunk 5. Food as identity and legacy. Written in the same immersive, slow, 11 Labs ready style. This will wrap the whole What the Vikings Ate story to a gentle close at approximately 5,000 words total. What the Vikings Ate, a sleep story. Chunk 5. Food as identity and legacy. The last embers of winter fade and spring returns. Shoots of green break the soil. Cattle are driven out once more, their bells clanging, their hooves thudding in the thawing earth. The rhythm of food continues, but now you see it as more than meals. It is identity. The Vikings were remembered as raiders, traders and sailors, but beneath the longships and the sagas they were farmers, herders and cooks. Their lives were measured not only in battles but in harvests, not only in voyages but in loaves. Food shaped who they were and how they were remembered. Bread told of fields. A simple flatbread could speak of barley in the uplands, rye in the valleys, oats near the shore. Cheese spoke of herds tended across pastures, of milk curdled and stored, of children carrying buckets twice their size. Fish told of the sea, of nets thrown wide, of smoke curling from huts built on the coast. Every bite was a map. Even status showed in food. A chieftain's table groaned with pork and beef. A thrall's bowl might hold only barley gruel. To taste was to know your place. But even in hardship there was sharing, ritual and rhythm. The sagas themselves are full of meals. Feasts where alliances were sealed with pork shoulders. Duels where opponents ate side by side before the fight. Even prophecies came with food. Dreams of banquets in Valhalla, where the slain would rise to eat boar anew each night. Food was not background, it was story. Modern researchers dig bones and grains from the earth and see the same tale. Isotopes in teeth tell of fish-heavy diets. Seeds from middens reveal barley, rye and flax. Even the tartar on ancient teeth carries whispers of milk and smoke. Science confirms what sagas sang, that Viking identity was bound up in what they ate. You walk once more into a longhouse. The benches are full, the hearth is lit, the air smells of bread, broth and wood smoke. Children pass wooden bowls, elders drink from horns, warriors carve meat. It is noisy, warm, alive, and you see that food was always more than survival. It was belonging. The Vikings are gone. The longships rot in museums. The sagas sit inked on vellum. The chessmen bite their shields forever. But their food lingers. In Iceland, skyr is still eaten. In Scandinavia, flatbread is still baked. In language, going berserk still echoes the howl of shield biters. Every taste, every word, every story keeps them alive. So when you think of the Vikings, do not picture only axe and shield. Picture bread steaming in the morning, cheese wrapped in cloth at midday, ale poured in the firelight of the feast, smoked meat waiting in rafters while snow falls outside. These too are Viking legacies. You close your eyes now. The hall quiets. The bowls are stacked. The fires dim, and you drift with the memory of meals that carried a people through centuries. The Vikings ate, the Vikings feasted, the Vikings endured, and now their story feeds your dreams,